On June 9, 2026, a protester died from a gunshot to the head. Kenyan police firing on Kenyan citizens. They were demonstrating against an American facility outside Nanyuki. I'm David, and what Washington won't allow on its own soil, it's quietly building in Kenya. 3 Kenyans dead. The flight's still landing. The man shot dead in Nanyuki on June 9, 2026, has not been named. Kenyan authorities never released his identity. What we know is this: he was in a crowd 120 miles north of Nairobi. The protest had been organized by Patrick Wahome and a coalition of locals. Small at first, then growing as word spread. Their target was a construction site at the nearby Laikipia Air Base. Hooded officers, the Kenya Human Rights Commission said, fired live bullets. Around 19 people were arrested that day. 2 more protesters had been killed in the same town the week before. 3 deaths, 1 town, in 2 weeks. What set Wahome's movement apart was its specificity. The grievance was a building. A 50-bed compound going up inside the airbase, paid for by the United States, that Washington had kept quiet to every diplomatic channel. Satellite imagery showed white tents appearing on a cleared 11-acre plot since May 27th. U.S. military flights kept ferrying in staff and equipment, even after a Kenyan high court ordered all work paused. The construction did not stop. Wahome's small protest had pulled an American secret into Kenyan daylight. So what exactly was Washington building behind that fence? The answer is one Washington never wanted on a press release. The compound at Laikipia is a quarantine facility exclusively for Americans. 50 beds set aside for U.S. citizens exposed to Ebola while working in 3 nearby countries, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda, and South Sudan. Kenyans were excluded by design. Here's how it works. An American in eastern DRC has a high-risk Ebola exposure. Touches a sick patient, treats one, lives near one. Under the State Department plan, that person volunteers to fly out. They land at Laikipia. They sit in one of those white tents for the 21-day incubation window, the time it takes for symptoms to surface. If no fever appears, they're cleared and sent home. If one does, they're moved on to Europe or back to the US, but only once it can be managed safely. This is medical risk, offshored, dressed up as partnership. Kenya has recorded 0 Ebola cases. The nearest outbreak is over 1,500 miles away, where the disease has killed more than 200 people. The World Health Organization declared a public health emergency on May 17, 2026, and there is no approved vaccine for this strain. So why build it in Kenya at all? For that, we look at Washington in 2025. Washington's answer starts with a man, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. In March 2025, Trump's new health secretary announced the deepest cuts to U.S. public health agencies in a generation. The CDC lost 2,400 jobs. The Food and Drug Administration was cut by 3,500. The National Institutes of Health shed another 1,100. Around 10,000 federal public health jobs gone. Many of them, the very people who would handle an Ebola response. Then came the One Big Beautiful Bill Act in July 2025. About $1 trillion stripped from Medicaid over 10 years. The Biden administration had proposed the largest CDC budget increase in 2 decades. Trump reversed it. In that gutted system, an Ebola-exposed American coming home becomes a problem nobody in Washington wants to manage. The 2014 to 2016 outbreak playbook, bring exposed cases back to specialist U.S. biocontainment units, monitor them at home, had been built on a much larger, better-funded CDC. By 2026, that workforce was gone. The Trump administration said it cannot and will not allow exposed cases to enter the country, so the cost equation flipped. A facility built and staffed in Kenya is far cheaper and far less politically visible than one built in Maryland. Washington had a cheaper problem to solve. It had found a host, but the host had its own politics and its own bill to pay. The bill came due in Nanyuki, and a woman named Priscilla Imani put it into one sentence. Laikipia is not a dumping site, and our voices must be heard. She was speaking to Reuters in early June 2026. Around her, a town built on tourism was watching its own brand get rewritten in real time. Nanyuki sits at the foot of Mount Kenya, snow-capped near the equator, climbed by trekkers from around the world. The town is the gateway. International visitors stop here before heading up the mountain, before visiting Laikipia's wildlife conservancies, where private reserves host elephants and rhinos that pull travelers in from every continent. Tourism dollars flow through the hotels, the guides, the small operators who keep the whole economy moving. Picture the search result a year from now: Nanyuki, Kenya, site of US Ebola quarantine. That label, attached to a place that has never recorded a single Ebola case, becomes the first thing a prospective tourist sees. The booking does not happen. The conservancy sits empty. Protesters said tourists were already canceling. The economic damage does not wait for a single American to fall ill at the facility. The label alone does it. And the income being lost belongs to guides, hotel staff, the small operators near the airbase. Far from the boardroom where the $13.5 million deal was signed. Those officials are led by President William Ruto, and his defense has been emphatic. The deal honored a decades-long partnership with Washington. The $13.5 million in preparedness funding would strengthen Kenya's own Ebola response. His health minister, Aden Duale, went further, insisting the center would serve everyone, a claim U.S. officials have never publicly confirmed. But Ruto is talking past a generation that does not trust him. In June 2024, 18 months before Nanyuki, young Kenyans stormed parliament against an unpopular finance bill. Police killed dozens. The scar is fresh, and many of the people in the streets today are the same age, fighting what feels like the same fight: a government that listens to foreign capitals before its own citizens. The political bind tightens from every angle. Refusing the facility means walking away from American money and military goodwill. Laikipia hosts a long-standing British and U.S. military presence. Accepting it means policing your own protesters with live bullets in a town that depends on tourism. So Ruto chose the harder road. He kept the facility. Police were given a free hand to crack down. The bet was that the courts and public would eventually fall in line. But former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua had already broken from him publicly, and an institution Kenya helped build was watching the whole episode in silence. That institution is the Africa Centers for Disease Control, Africa, CDC, based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Created in 2017, it spent the last decade building the continent's own early warning system, cross-border outbreak alerts, regional labs, trained epidemiologists who could spot an Ebola flare and contain it. Africa, CDC, is the kind of partner Washington kept telling the world it wanted Africa to have. And Washington bypassed it. The Trump administration did not route its Ebola plan through Africa CDC. The Nanyuki facility went up as a standalone unit for American citizens only, offered to one government, Ruto's to host. That choice told a story. The Katiba Institute and the Kenya Law Society, the groups that took the plan to court, used a specific phrase to describe it: colonial decision-making. A Kenyan physician quoted by NPR used almost the same words. A real partnership would have asked Africa's own institutions what they needed and built capacity on the continent. What landed instead was a sealed 50-bed compound, accessible only to Americans. Nanyuki sat inside a bigger pattern. USAID had been dissolved. The World Health Organization had been walked out on. Infectious disease programs across the region had been cut. To African leaders, Nanyuki was the confirmation. And the question now was how far the pattern would go. It already had gone far. In Trump's first 18 months back in office, the U.S. dismantled the architecture of its global health leadership piece by piece, USAID. The agency that for 60 years had delivered American aid abroad was dissolved in mid-2025. The withdrawal from the World Health Organization, threatened for years, became formal in January 2026. Funding for infectious disease programs across the region was cut. The Nanyuki facility is the other side of that retreat. Washington is pulling out of building African health systems, and at the same moment asking African countries to host American medical risk on the cheap. The U.S. gets the quarantine. African host states get the label, the protests, the cost of policing their own citizens for hosting it. Look at the trade. Kenya gets $13.5 million in preparedness funding. The Trump administration gets a 50-bed unit it could not have built politically at home. For what specialist biocontainment costs in Maryland, this is small change. The trade is real. So is the gap between what each side pays. The research points to a broader strategy: shrink Washington's domestic health spending, then offshore the residual risk to countries with less leverage to refuse. On current trends, more facilities like Nanyuki will appear in more African capitals, each one bought with a similar small sum, each one carrying the same political fallout for the host. America's risk gets cheaper to manage. Someone else's politics gets harder. For now, the deciding voice is Kenya's High Court. In early June 2026, the court suspended construction and the arrival of any American patients. The order was extended by roughly 3 weeks, but satellite imagery still shows white tents on the cleared 11-acre plot. U.S. military flights have kept coming in. 3 institutions now hold Ruto's fate: the court, Parliament, the street. The court can let the suspension lapse or extend it. Parliament can ratify the deal or refuse to. The street has already shown what it will do. Patrick Wahomi's coalition has not gone away, and the man who died on June 9th has not been named. If the court reverses and clears construction, the protests return. If Parliament ratifies the deal, the 2024 round reopens. The Trump administration will keep the flights coming either way, because the cost equation has not changed. Washington's biosecurity stays on the cheap. Kenya's politics stay on the line. Step back and trace the line through this whole story. An outbreak in eastern DRC. A gutted health bureaucracy in Washington. A facility built behind a Kenyan Air Base fence. A protester shot dead 120 miles north of Nairobi. The threat is one decision: who gets to refuse risk and who has to host it. Ebola was the surface. Underneath was the question of which countries still get to say no. A protester dies in Nanyuki, and a 50-bed unit goes up anyway. That's the cost of risk Washington won't carry at home. I'm David. Like and subscribe to keep me on this. See you tomorrow.